what we're really trying to do is step back and ask the question of what got us here. Is that going to keep us here? Is that really going to be the model that we need?
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is James Ross. James is the Chief Technology Officer of Danaher, a $24 billion revenue conglomerate that is the leading producer of technology and services for the biopharmaceutical industry, as well as instrumentation for vaccines and gene therapies. He's been in his role for a bit more than 2 years, and James is responsible for leading the modernization and transformation of infrastructure and enabling the acceleration of the digital transformation across the company. Prior to his current post, James spent more than 2 decades at GE, ending his tenure there as the Chief Information Officer of Global Functions and Digital Hubs. James, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Great to talk to you as well, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, James, I would love to have you begin with an overview to Danaher's business. Quite an interesting and diverse business that it is. And if you could just take a couple of minutes and describe it, I think that'd be helpful context setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Danaher is a fantastic and amazing company, and it's one of these companies that may not be a household name, but is a company that most people have probably interacted with or been a part of at some point over the last couple of years. And it's a company that's actually been around, surprisingly enough, for over 40 years. And it was founded by two brothers. Very fascinating story. They were fly fishing in Montana on the Danaher River. They decided that they wanted to get into real estate trust. They wanted to grow the partnership. And that real estate trust, very early foundings of the company, has now turned into a $24 billion global conglomerate. And we're a company of companies. So we are made up of several different platforms and industries. But at Danaher, we really like to talk about innovation at the speed of life. And for us, that really looks at a number of different areas. And one of them is being a leading producer of technology and services around biopharmaceutical, around instrumentation. And we're also very big in consumables used in vaccine and gene therapy. So we're everywhere. Probably just not the name that most people are familiar with. They're probably a little bit more familiar with the some of our major operating companies, but we were a company that was very important during the pandemic. We were responsible for the production of over 10 billion COVID-19 vaccines. So very proud to be a part of a company that started with two brothers fly fishing and is now a company that's producing vaccines and helping cure some of the major diseases in the world today.
Remarkable. Thank you for that overview. Likewise, could you provide a bit of an overview of your purview and role as Chief Technology Officer?
Yeah, and the CTO role has changed quite a bit. I would say over the last 25 years, and I've been in the industry for a bit, so I've seen that evolution. And in the early days, a CTO is likely going to be responsible for data centers, infrastructure, the early plumbing, if you will, for IT. And so much of that has changed now. So when I think about my role and where I spend majority of my time, it's actually on IT strategy and business strategy. It's helping the business understand where technology can enable and drive change within the company. It's also making sure that we understand how we have the right technology roadmap to sustain that, and that we're taking care of technical debt in areas where we need to make investments. So a large portion of my time is on strategy. Second part is with technology vision, road mapping, making sure that we understand our initial strategy, but also where technology is going to help enable those inflection points, and how do we make sure we have a roadmap that's going to help us drive forward. Third major area, no surprise, data and analytics, AI. It's kind of hard to pick up any sort of newspaper these days without the word AI somewhere printed in it. So it is going to be here to stay, fortunately, unfortunately. But it is a very important, again, kind of inflection point, I think, for where we're at from a technology perspective. So that's a big part of it. And then last but not least is how do we provide that right level of IT shared services or service offerings throughout a given day? People are going to get stuck from time to time, and how do they get the right level of IT service that they need to be able to continue on in their job? So that's predominantly where I spend most of my time, but I enjoy the strategy piece the most. I think that's where we really can elevate the function and be a big part of the change that's happening across the company as well.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the substance of that very strategy? You talked about the the business strategy and IT's the levers you have to pull in order to help bring it to life. Talk a bit about some of the areas that you and the team are focused on, if you would.
Yeah, so we are double clicking on AI. I think AI is going to be a very critical part for us, and we're really looking at it across a couple continuums. Internally, we see it as a big productivity game changer. We're seeing the advent of or introduction of co-pilots and all sorts of other nice enhancements and additive assistance that are going to help us in our day-to-day job. So we're spending a lot of time figuring out where is that going to take us. How do we do it in the right way as well? We know that there is a concern out there that if we just had everyone at the company putting every piece of information into Chat GPT, that probably would not be a good thing for our business going forward. So making sure we have the right level of protection and governance around it. But then also thinking about how does AI transform our business models. So today we have a lot of medical devices and instrumentation that is collecting enormous amounts of data. That data could be very valuable in developing new gene therapies, new vaccines, new cures for diseases out there that might not otherwise have been discovered. And so we're really trying to use AI not just on the productivity internal side, but also how do we help transform the company and build new business models for the company as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And you mentioned at the outset the structure of the organization, operating companies, and a diverse array of businesses. And I know that part of your priority in recent months has been to help facilitate some more commonality across that diverse array of businesses, moving from a fairly strictly, and you'll correct me if I'm framing this incorrectly, but a fairly strictly federated structure to one that has at least more influence from the center. Can you talk a bit
Correct.
about the rationale for the transformation and some of the steps that you've undertaken?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to have the context and the setting for why the change, because it's companies are always evolving, but I think there's always kind of that question of well why now, or why is it important for where we're at? And if you were to rewind even 10 years ago and look at kind of where Danaher was at back then to where it's at today, very, very different company in terms of how we operate. And 10 years ago, we were a low single digit growth company. We were about 19 billion or so in revenue. We had over 43 operating companies. So we were in a vast array of different industries. We were a manufacturing company. We had an environmental science company. We were a dental company. We were doing fairly well. We had, about 19% operating margin. So, pretty healthy for a company of that size. But there was more to happen in terms of kind of what Danaher was really looking to become. And now as we sit today, we're roughly a $24 billion company, high single digit growth. So we're in much healthier businesses in terms of the overall kind of op margin expansion. And when you look at it kind of from a 10-year expansion perspective, we've seen that growth has put a lot of pressure on how we run the company. And historically, it would have been very OpCo centric, is the term we would use, which meant we'd buy a company, we would bring in all that great product and great service offerings, but we wouldn't do a whole lot to integrate it very, very much within the greater kind of Danaher ecosystem. We would leave it alone, let it kind of do its own thing, and we would bring in some process improvement and things along the way to drive efficiencies, but not really anything at the technology level. It was always kind of probably seen as a bit of a distraction, or maybe something that wasn't going to be a big enabler for the company going forward. Now you fast forward to where we're at today, purely science and technology based. The need for technology is even greater. So what we're really trying to do is step back and ask the question of what got us here. Is that going to keep us here? Is that really going to be the model that we need? And what we've realized is that having this purely OpCo-centric model where we have most of IT kind of living individually within each of those OpCos, there's a lot of overlap, duplication. We're not leveraging the size and scale. We're not unlocking the value of IT and bringing some of those best of breed technologies forward. So we are looking at trying to change that model, and we're doing it in a couple different ways. And for us, what we like to do is kind of take a step back and say, well, what is IT? I think a lot of times it can be a complicated function. I'm sure we all get asked, like, well, what does it really do, and what value does it really drive? And the way I like to describe it and the way we talk about it in Danaher is IT is really one of four things. And I think it really is one of four things for any company out there. It's either going to be IT for customer. So what is all of those digital solutions, service products, things that we're building into our go-to-market products and services. It's IT for business. So how are we driving efficiency, productivity, enabling automation so that the business can run better? It's IT for associates. So how do we provide that kind of base experience? How do people get connected? How do they talk and communicate to each other? And how do they access all the information they need to access? And then it's IT for IT, which is all that kind of foundational infrastructure layer. So as we think about Danaher going forward, we use that lens, and the way we're structuring is we're saying anything that's IT for customer, anything that's IT for business, largely should live as close to the point of impact as possible, as close to our customers, as close to our business units. There likely is some synergies that we want to gain. We don't want to lose that unique capability, that differentiation that's going to happen at the OpCo. Anything that is more common in nature, maybe more of a commodity type of service, we want to look at trying to scale that. So anything that's IT for associate, IT for IT, we have a lot of focus right now on trying to drive those into more central shared services, more central offerings. And in our mind, that's where the real value will be unlocked, is using the size and scale of Danaher, using the knowledge we have around how to run the systems more effectively, but also making sure we're focusing each of our IT teams in the right way, so we're not creating that overlap and that duplication that we want to try to avoid going forward as well.
I really like that framing. Thank you for explaining the four ways of thinking about technology. And I wonder, how is the org structure reflecting some of what you've described? Surely you must therefore have technology resources in the closer to the customer, within the embedded in the business, just as you have sort of that shared pool for the IT for associates and IT for IT. Can you talk a bit about how you've thought about some of the changes, the extent to which there have been some,
Yeah,
reflecting the four constituent groups, and how you think about those facets that are more tailored or unique versus those that are more common?
yeah, absolutely. And historically, if you would have looked at any of our opcos, they would have essentially had a kind of a combination of all four of those. They would be trying to do all four, and a lot of times they'd be trying to do it all at once with very precious resources, which what we found was happening a lot of times is that naturally what was happening was the resources and the organization was much more aligned around the commodity services, the IT for associate, IT for IT. We didn't have as much kind of critical thinking happening at the customer level within IT, as well as the business transformation. We had some good thinking, but probably not as much resourcing as what we would want to enable that. So what we are doing now is starting to relook at that model to say, what if we're able to centralize that IT for associate and IT for IT service layer, bring the best and brightest together so that we can kind of rising tide lifts all ships, as we bring those services forward, but then allow the businesses to have a much more focus, a much more deliberate attention around the customer in the business layer, and use some of that valuable precious headcount for things that are going to be much more higher value, closer point of impact, things that are really going to drive productivity, revenue, and growth for the company, but have that really kind of live within the opcos themselves. So it'll be a couple year journey. There's a lot of components that we'll have to think about to make sure we get it right. But our feeling is, if we can organize in the right way, if we can move into a structured model where we have people that are focused and have the right kind of goals and priorities, we can really drive a much better, much more cohesive IT strategy for the company going forward as well.
And as you reviewed your areas of purview as CTO, the third area you covered was data analytics, artificial intelligence. You talked a bit about some of the areas of emphasis from an AI perspective as well. How do you think about data and analytics and artificial intelligence layered into the four different constituent groups you talked about? In a similar vein to what you've just described, do you also think about data that is unique or governed and managed within the opcos, or as close to the customer, versus that which is sort of in a central pool? How do you think about the organization and governance of that?
Yeah. So we're going through that analysis now, but the way we're kind of framing it is anything that we feel like has, we're using the term group catalyzed value. So anything that has that element that lives across multiple opcos or even within a given platform, things that have the highest value across that have a level of commonality, a level of intricate connective tissue. We want to try to elevate that likely to a platform level. So rather than trying to bring it to an enterprise, because we have all 14 of our opcos are very different in terms of how they operate. What we want to do is elevate data to our platform level using kind of a lens to say, if we have common customers, if we're using a common service methodology, if we have a common way of manufacturing or delivery models, how do we leverage and bring that data into common data warehouses, common data structures, so that we can mine the data, so that we can understand and grab intelligence off the data, and ultimately, where we can, drive even greater efficiencies and productivity back into our business and into our critical stakeholders across the company. So yeah, it's multi-pronged, I would say. We're not as far along as I think we would want to be, but we understand where we need to go, and it's going to be an important part of our strategy as we move forward as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I wonder if you could talk, as you look to the future, what are some additional trends? We've talked about a number of them already, but any other trends you would highlight that are particularly exciting to you that are making their way onto your roadmap?
Yeah, I would say a couple things stand out to me. I would say in things that we're looking at, I think one is it goes without saying that AI is going to have to be a pretty big part of our strategy and how we deliver our services going forward. And as we think about that from the IT side and maybe taking that associate lens, we're seeing that there's more and more of these assistive technologies that are coming onto the scene. So things like the sales co-pilots, the Microsoft co-pilots, the ones that are going to be embedded in our natural productivity tools that are going to do work for us that maybe were cumbersome or difficult that maybe we just couldn't do as good as the machines can. So I'm extremely excited, and we're doing a lot of test trials right now of how those tools can help drive more efficiency, more time back for our associates, as well as help provide better results. And we're seeing it, today where we're using some of the sales co-pilot tools. We can see sentiment analysis across our customer bases as we're working through and having dialogues with our customers. We can use that to help drive more targeted conversations around service and product offerings that we would want to demonstrate and showcase to them. So we're seeing more and more that assistive technology is going to be very, very critical, and we think that's here to stay and is going to definitely be a part of all the work that we're doing going forward. I would say the second thing, I think that obviously the amount of data that we're producing is becoming more and more, and the needs to mine it and use data and analytics and AI to generate insights is going to be more and more critical. So we're very bullish on what a ChatGPT and what the large language models are going to be able to produce for us in the future. I think that's going to be extremely important. And then last, I think in a lot of ways it's probably been it's been talked about for a little while now, and I think there's been articles probably written that that the metaverse is dead, but I'd beg to differ that I think we're just at the beginning of what AR, VR, what the kind of metaverse of the future will look like. And for those that haven't got a chance to see the Apple Vision Pro or some of the new kind of VR technology that's coming out on the scenes, it really is revolutionizing that whole experience. And I think it's going to have a tremendous amount of applicability, both on the consumer side. I think there's some interesting things that you can do, the different immersive videos and games and things that will come out of it. But really trying to think about how does that translate into the commercial and business side as well is going to be very interesting. And it's not unreasonable to think that there could be a situation in the not too near future where a doctor is wearing a VR augmented reality headset and performing surgery thousands of miles away on a patient that needs critical surgery and can't get the access to the resources that they need. So think we still need a few more years to get there, but I think that is the world that we're living in today, and where technology is going tomorrow. So yeah, I think those are a few that I would say definitely to keep an eye on. Definitely ones that we're spending time investing in and making sure we understand how to think about them in the world that we work in at Danaher, and we're extremely excited about those as well.
Yeah, I look forward to remaining abreast of the progress you and the team make in those very areas. I wanted to also ask you, James, prior to the 2+ years that you've been in your current role, you had a consequential tenure at GE, and you're one
Yeah.
of a growing diaspora of former CIOs from GE who've gone on to become CIOs, CTOs at other meaningful organizations. You were a SVP CIO Global Functions and Digital Hubs. You were at one point also a CTO within the organization, among other technology lead roles that you had. I wonder, upon further reflection, what is it about the experience at GE that has been such a catalyst for so many of your peers to go on to not only leadership roles within that company, but now leadership roles in so many other industries? Any reflections that particularly come to mind?
Yeah, I'd say a couple, and it's a great question, and it is a there's a strong network out there, and it is great to have so many colleagues that have gone on to do incredible things. And as I reflect back and having kind of grown up with a lot of them, I would say first and foremost, I mean, the investment in leadership development. I think was second to none, and they had a training development center. It was a big part of how leaders develop was getting a chance to go to that center, be amongst other leaders, learn in real world kind of scenarios how to lead and operate in different ways. And so we really invested quite a bit in that level of leadership. I personally joined through their entry level IT leadership program, and for the first 2 years, I wasn't in a permanent job. I was actually moving around every 6 months to a new job, new experience, working for new leaders, constantly changing, constantly evolving. And I think that kind of conditioning around change and being able to lead in all different types of climates and environments was extremely critical, and I think an important part of the GE experience. I think two is just having such a wide array of industries that GE was working in gave you the opportunity to essentially kind of reinvent yourself all part of this within the same company ecosystem. So a couple of years you could work at an aircraft engines business, a couple of years you could work at a healthcare business, and then a couple of years you could work at a renewable energy business, all still within the same brand. And not many companies have that wide of a spectrum of industry that they work in. And I think having the ability to work across those was extremely critical. And I'd say third is that network. I think through all those different experiences that we all had, I think there was a very and has continued to be a very strong network that forms. And I think the culture, the way that it was really expected that people work together in a collaborative way, it was very natural. And so yeah, it's been how I've gotten to where I've gotten to, and I've very happy that I got those experiences throughout the 20+ years I was with GE as well.
Yeah, and I was wondering beyond that. Obviously, that's a critical element that's helped propel you to the current role that you have. Any other difference makers along the way as you reflect upon your pathway now to be a multiple-time C-suite executive at multiple large-scaled organizations? Any other further reflections on the secrets to your success, James?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. I think for me, I think being willing to take the job that maybe not everyone would want, or taking the job that maybe isn't going as well. I think I got advice early on from a really good mentor of mine that said, take the job no one else wants, because one of two things is going to happen. It's you're either going to make it better, or they'll ask you to do something else later on, and either way is probably not the worst of the situation. So it was there were a number of times that I got the chance to be thrown into something that maybe was a little bit more challenging than I expected, or wasn't going as well as I expected, but always gave me the opportunity to learn. I think it was Bill Gates said one time, success is a lousy teacher, which I actually agree with. I think a lot of times if you are in a situation that you have a lot of success, you don't always kind of reflect back, well, what caused that, and how do you continue to sharpen the sword to get better. And so I think that throwing yourself into something like that, I think is important. I think also having a certain mindset of being curious, being willing to learn and ask a lot of questions. I always like to quote, seek to understand before being understood. So, I always kind of encourage people that I mentor as well. Ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and show that you're interested. I think that goes a long way. Having the relationships, those mentors, like we talked about with GE, I think that was extremely important for me to have some people that were helping guide me along my pathway. And then I'd say last but not least, not taking myself too seriously. I do like to have a lot of fun at work. I try to encourage and create that same sort of culture. And I feel like if you can't work hard, play hard, then then why bother? So I always try to make sure I'm working in an environment, working in a team where we can have some fun along the way and make sure we take some time out to laugh and to get to know each other in a more informal way as well. So yeah, I would say those are just a few things I've learned throughout my career as well.
Great reflection, James. I really appreciate you sharing each of those. And thank you for a great conversation beyond that as well, speaking to the evolution and transformation that you're helping drive at Danaher, some of your views as to what's to come, including some really interesting innovations afoot, leveraging data and analytics, artificial intelligence, among a variety of things we covered. Thank you for a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you again for taking the time, Peter. I appreciate it.